Grown-up politics starts with direct speech. Some people might call that telling the truth. I don't know whether the truth is as accessible as some people think it might be. But truth in international relations is still a rare commodity, often mangled by diplomacy, distorted by interests, or simply buried under rubble. My truth is not necessarily someone else's truth. But occasionally, as with President Emmanuel Macron's recent remarks in Hanoi, it breaks through with startling lucidity. This then is not just a tour of Southeast Asia, it's a tour of reckoning, a moment where one statesman invites another, Donald Trump, to graduate from the school of illusion to the lecture hall of consequences. President Macron's trip through Vietnam, Indonesia, and Singapore may have been intended as a soft power showcase, trade talks, symbolic gestures, cultural diplomacy. Instead, it was hijacked by events in Europe, or rather, events emanating from Moscow, delivered by drones soaked in blood. In Hanoi, Macron stood before the world and said plainly Trump realizes Putin lied to him, not euphemistically, not diplomatically, he said lied. That matters, because diplomacy, for all its euphemisms, stated ambiguity, plausible deniability, depends eventually on candour, and otherwise it descends into theatre. And we should recall the supposed promise. Vladimir Putin, on the telephone with Trump, said he was ready for peace in Ukraine, and Trump, in that tragic blend of narcissism and naivety, believed him. And while that conversation took place, Russian Tu-95 bombers were loading Kh-101 cruise missiles. More than 600 drones were being prepared to flatten cities across Ukraine, and Ukrainian civilians, the very people Putin claimed he wished to spare, were marked for death. And precisely marked for death, people operating these drones could see where the drones were going. Macron, having endured his own 12-month diplomatic dance with Putin, recognizes the pattern. He was conned too, but unlike Trump, he has stopped pretending otherwise. And Trump, to his credit, certainly responded, Putin's gone crazy, he said. I was right, he wants all of Ukraine. But in typical Trumpian fashion, the burst of moral clarity was quickly muddied by a side sweep of Zelensky. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. Well, there we have it, the infantile impulse to blame the victim. The man who stood in Kyiv while bombs fell, who buried his citizens while Western leaders hesitated, now accused of being too loud, too defiant. It's here that Macron's frustration bubbles over. Trump's anger, he suggests, must translate into action, not petulant social media tantrums, but the sort of strategic clarity the moment demands. And then, amid the graveyards of Donbass and the drone strikes of Sumy, we were treated to a slap. A slap. Or a push. Or more precisely, a moment of Brigitte Macron mockingly brushing her husband's face on the runway to Hanoi. Twitter lit up. Macron's critics delighted in the footage of Madame Macron and her hand. That's a hand job that will go down in history. Let's not indulge in global farce. You see me joking with my wife, Macron quipped, and suddenly it becomes a planetary crisis. Yeah, absolutely. A hand is a hand. It's symptomatic. It's not. It's not. It's not some sort of mark of global politics. It tells us more about the digital fog in which serious matters are drowned by nonsense. The slap, such as it was, is a metaphor for distraction, for disinformation, for misplaced outrage. And we must always get back to the substance. We mustn't forget the lightness, we must never forget the lightness, because that's what makes life livable. But Macron proposes that the West, led by the US and Europe in coordination, offer Putin a firm deadline, a ceasefire by a fixed date, not a line in the sand, but a date etched into the diplomatic calendar with sanctions primed to follow. The doublespeak Macron says must end. We need proof, a deadline to expose the lie. And yet so far the Biden administration has hesitated, and Trump, despite his belated indignation, has not followed through. We remain in this dangerous middle ground of words without consequences, of words without meaning. But Putin understands the consequence. Putin understands the meaning of words. Even as Macron tries to galvanize support for Ukraine, he's also fighting on another front. He's fighting on the trade front with Putin, with Trump. Trump's trade tariffs, his threat of 50% tariffs on EU imports looms over the summer. And Macron, in his remarks, warned that trade wars are no way to address imbalances, that they hamper investment, they distort cooperation. He's right. Protectionism might excite Trump's base, but it undermines the very solidity and the very solidarity required to confront bigger global issues, be it climate conflict or contagion. This is time for unity, not tariffs, tantrums, and transactional selfishness from Trump. So what are we to make of this? The grown-up politics begins with when leaders acknowledge that they were wrong and then act accordingly. And Macron has done so. He believed Putin. He was misled. He now says so clearly. Trump, too, has begun to admit it, but words are not enough. The time for sulking, for blaming Zelensky, or for making anything about himself has passed for Trump. And that needs to be acknowledged. Trump needs to grow up. As Macron said in Hanoi, our priority now is to give Putin a deadline so that everyone can see that he is lying. This isn't to invite World War III. This is to stop it. And we must give ourselves a deadline. We must stop believing liars. We must start believing and behaving like adults. And we must live in the optimism that things can improve, not in this pessimism that we have to believe the lies of propagandists and the lies that tell us that we are bent on some sort of eternal conflict because somebody in the fridge can't find the popsicle, the lollipop, the iced sweet. Mr. Putin, like Mr. Trump, needs to grow up. We cannot be ruled by children in temper tantrums.